What occurs if a family secret is revealed to everyone? Joni Lamb has spent decades cultivating her reputation and image in the public eye. However, her own son-in-law has now done something startling that has the potential to ruin everything. Nobody could have predicted how horrific the truth about what he did was. And once it's out, there might be no turning back. Was there a premeditation behind this lie? Or could it be the most significant error that could cause everything to go wrong? Like any other family dispute, the letter begins with one person talking loudly and the other being ignored. For many years, Joni Lamb confidently gave her version of events to the media. She said that the negative remarks made about Pete were merely falsehoods propagated by her son Jonathan and his wife Susie on television and stage. It was an easy situation, she remarked. Susie and Jonathan were upset with one another. They were the only ones who realized something was amiss, and they failed to grasp it. That response made logic, was believable, and provided comfort to Daystar's devoted audience. However, occasionally the truth is revealed, and in this case, it was just one letter. They weren't from outside Daystar, they weren't someone who didn't like Daystar, and they weren't even anonymous. It came from a family member Joni had complete faith in. It was her daughter Rebecca's spouse and son-in-law, Jonathan Weiss. Anyone who believed Jonathan and Susie were simply being cruel and bringing charges on their own would have been shocked by the letter. Often referred to as JW, he documented his observations and forwarded them directly to a Daystar board member. His statements were unambiguous, first-hand recollections that raised no doubts. They were neither ambiguous nor based on hearsay. JW described events he witnessed involving Pete, Jonathan, and Susie's young daughter in the message. He made it apparent to readers that he was very troubled by what he observed. It wasn't the uncomplicated love Joni had claimed in public. It wasn't an error. JW believed that Pete's actions were physically incorrect and went too far. He wrote it concisely and plainly, with no justifications. The letter provided evidence from within the family to those who believed the occurrence was merely a series of hearsay. The letter was significantly riskier because of its date. For months, Joni had insisted that those claims were coming only from Jonathan and Susie. She gave the impression that Pete's entire family was behind him. The letter tore apart that picture. There was evidence that the inappropriate behavior had been witnessed by multiple people. This demonstrated that Jonathan and Susie were not exaggerating or fabricating their concerns. As it happened, a Lamb family son-in-law who had nothing to gain by stepping forward concurred with their previous statements. Nevertheless, the police never received the letter. For unclear reasons, JW and his attorney declined to provide a copy when asked. People began to question even more because of this silence. Why write something so hard and then keep it a secret? Was it fear of what might occur? Are their family members exerting pressure? Despite knowing the truth, the urge to protect the ministry? For whatever reason, the absence of that letter from the official files allowed Daystar's public narrative to continue for some time without significant criticism. But there was no denying its presence. When everyone learned that JW had documented what he saw, everything changed forever. Susie, Jonathan, and the rest of the family had finished fighting. It was about shattered illusions of togetherness, secret evidence, and the price of defending an institution at any costs. The letter revealed weaknesses in Daystar's well-constructed public persona. It caused individuals to reflect carefully on how long the truth had been kept from the public and what else might have been concealed. The letter was more significant than any lecture, even though it wasn't shouted from a platform or broadcast on television. It demonstrated that the official narrative was not entirely accurate. One that was authored by family members rather than enemies. Things started to alter at that point. No one could genuinely claim that the accusations were made out of resentment or retaliation after that. The truth was something that could never truly be removed once it was in writing. For a long time, Daystar presented the Lamb family in a way that made them appear resilient, strong, and unified. The message was consistent: only Jonathan and Susie were causing difficulties, and the entire family was united in their defense of Pete. This was said in formal statements, on stage, and on television. That image was easy for the outside world to believe. Ultimately, Daystar was a successful television empire as well as a place of worship. Its leaders were adept at maintaining order, and the concept of a family bound together by devotion and faith was a natural fit for the brand. Although they were being meticulously concealed, the fissures were already visible behind the scenes. Susie and Jonathan were immediately viewed as outsiders when they initially expressed their concerns. They were incorrect, angry, and just intending to harm the church, Joni informed them. People noticed that they were the only ones in the family that shared their opinions. Because it gave the impression that Jonathan and Susie were fleeing their own family, the story of the united family was compelling. Who would trust two people more than the entire church, the Lamb family, and everyone else? That was a clever strategy to make the narrative clear, uncomplicated, and easy to understand. However, when Joni's son-in-law Jonathan Weiss put his thoughts in writing, that story began to unravel. JW had some acquaintances. He said nothing negative about Daystar. He was married to Rebecca, Joni's daughter, therefore he had a close relationship with the community. He had nothing to gain by standing by Jonathan and Susie unless he genuinely believed what he had witnessed was wrong, thus it was crucial that he speak up. His letters subtly but powerfully shattered the notion that the family was together by describing things he had personally witnessed. JW demonstrated that other people had witnessed the inappropriate act. Only Jonathan and Susie was no longer a good enough excuse. The fractures widened when people discovered that Rebecca, Joni's daughter, had also been aware of things that didn't seem right. The family unity that Joni so boldly spoke about was more of a fantasy than a reality for Rebecca and her husband. Disobedience and going against the grain were not limited to a single son and his spouse. Much more was happening here. The various family members were furious with one another. The safety of a child was at stake in these disputes, not simply upset feelings. Nevertheless, Daystar put in a lot of effort to maintain the falsehood for years. They promoted the concept of a strong family defending one another whenever they were in public. According to her public remarks and interviews, Joni came across as a mother who supported Pete and had given everything considerable attention. The way she spoke gave the impression that Susie and Jonathan were by themselves and that she was acting inappropriately. Given that Jonathan and Susie were being relegated, denied authority, and labeled as troublemakers, many people didn't challenge that account of what happened. The cost of publicly criticizing the family was considerable, and most people who were aware of what was happening chose to remain silent rather than engage in conflict. However, silence does not alter the facts, and the fissures became wider and wider. After JW's letter was published, the tale of oneness began to sound phony. When things was fine, people couldn't understand why someone so close to Joni would write such a terrible letter. They couldn't figure out why it hadn't been handed to the police if the intention was to be transparent. The discrepancies grew in number. A family that claimed to be together but was obviously not to those who knew them well. Government statements said that all would be obvious, while confidential documents presented a different picture. The objective of the unity photo was to reassure people that everything was well and preserve the ministry's positive reputation. However, it also meant concealing difficult-to-face facts. While others who had supported Jonathan and Susie, such as JW and Rebecca, remained silent, others believed that they were terrible because they wouldn't keep quiet. They weren't silent because they didn't think what they were seeing was real. It was because it was too frightening to speak out again due to the need to protect the church and the family. That stress caused the family to disintegrate from the inside out. The family appeared to be strong and well-maintained on the outside, but the appearance of unity was shattered when additional details regarding the letter and other covert accounts were revealed. Supporters of the squad who watched TV were aware that what they were witnessing was more of a show than the real thing. Families are challenging, and no family remains cohesive when circumstances are that bad. Acting as though nothing was wrong was Daystar's worst mistake. When the truth was revealed, it revealed more than simply Pete's inappropriate actions. It demonstrated the calm society, the desire to appear well, and the willingness to tell lies for aesthetic reasons. There were gaps in the family's tale that revealed something more serious than a dispute. They demonstrated how those who put too much effort into trying to be in charge might undermine trust. Once those fissures were present, no amount of speeches, interviews, or manufactured family photos could hide them. In addition to what actually transpired with Pete, fans were left wondering what else the family had been concealing in order to protect Daystar. There was no longer the gleaming image of unity. There was now something far more human, messy, divided, and full of secrets that no one could discuss, and no amount of press releases could change it. From the beginning, Daystar put a lot of effort into directing the narrative. In the event that someone was accused, the office always had a statement prepared. They were confident, polished, and well-written. In interviews and TV appearances, Joni Lamb said that Pete was not guilty of the charges against him and that her family was strong. She assured everyone that the rest of the family was sticking together and that the only people who were angry with him were Jonathan and Susie. It made sense to the people. If a mother didn't believe the facts supported her child, why would she still support them? However, it grew more difficult to conceal when the facts diverged from what the administration claimed over time. Daystar initially claimed that Pete had been looked into and found not guilty. He said that no evidence had been discovered and that Pete had complied completely with the police. They interpreted it as a victory, evidence that Pete was innocent as revealed by God. After applauding and praying, people assumed the problem had been resolved and went on. That was only the tip of the iceberg. This was not the end of the study. It simply came to a halt. Not because Pete wasn't suspected, but because it was difficult to speak to a small child, police said. The case was placed on hold. The official declarations omitted that crucial truth. Instead, they provided a clearer, more accurate description of what transpired, eliminating any possibility of doubt. The reality, however, was much more complex. The family's situation wasn't quite as straightforward as the press reports suggested. Susie and Jonathan weren't the only ones who felt that the actions were inappropriate. Joni's son-in-law, Jonathan Weiss, sent a lengthy letter discussing things that deeply disturbed him that he had witnessed and experienced. He wasn't speculating or making up tales. He sent the Daystar board his own comments regarding what he had witnessed. According to several readers of his letter, he was horrified by the passages in which Pete kissed and hugged Jonathan and Susie's daughter. The pure thing was not love. It was obvious from his statements that it was wrong. Now contrast that with the government's claim that only Jonathan and Susie have complained. No one else is having any issues. The family remains together. Both cannot be true at the same time. Either someone else spoke up or the entire family agreed. JW's letter demonstrated that the official narrative was untrue. In actuality, a number of people, some of whom were highly significant to the Lamb family, were concerned. Even more telling was the fact that the letter had been misplaced. The police never understood. JW and Rebecca remained silent despite being asked, preventing the letter from ending up in the wrong hands. It wasn't until much later that the public became aware of it. At the same time, Daystar insisted that the noise was simply two irate voices and that there was nothing wrong with its consumers. Evidence showing those statements were untrue existed behind the scenes, but it was kept under wraps. The silence was as significant as the words. Both were strategies for controlling the truth. People's actions in private and their words in public differed greatly, which caused mistrust and uncertainty. For many devoted admirers, Daystar's statement sounded like a given. When Joni claimed her son Jonathan was being cruel and dishonest, they took her word for it. However, when the truth about JW's letter was revealed, that confidence crumbled. People realized they were missing some important details. They questioned what else might have been concealed when some significant details were omitted from the narrative. The official narratives consistently painted Pete as the victim of lies and rumors. However, the reality revealed that the family was divided and that his actions had caused tension for other members. According to the official narrative, the investigation was permanently concluded. The truth revealed that it reopened later, which rekindled Pete's suspicions. According to the official account, Jonathan's poor performance at Daystar led to his termination. The facts revealed that he was disciplined for refusing to sign a non-disclosure agreement and keep silent. The gap between what was stated and what was actually true continued to widen. Daystar consistently chose the version of events that would preserve the ministry's reputation, even if it meant omitting less flattering details. From the outside, it appeared to be unity and power. For those inside, it felt like that. Speaking the truth was not as crucial as maintaining one's reputation. No amount of well-written words could undo the harm once that trend was noticed. Official remarks run the risk of coming across as the final word. They sound like the conclusion of the story. However, in this instance, they were merely expertly altered images intended to conceal more than they revealed. Through private anecdotes, rumors of a fresh probe, and letters, parts of the truth continued to leak out. And the gap between what actually occurred and what the administration said grew too great to ignore with every release. There was conflict between claims and truth, and it wasn't due to a single man. It was about public image, loyalty, and power. It concerned a church that chose to remain safe rather than confront the issues within its own family. It was heartbreaking for people who had believed all the government claimed to discover they had been misled. It demonstrated to Jonathan and Susie the lengths their family will go to in order to silence them. It also demonstrated to the rest of the Lamb family the cost of silence. Not all speeches and official documents reveal the truth. It may manifest as covert emails, dishonest admissions, or the voids left by assertions. The official narrative and the facts were never consistent when it came to Daystar. And the lovely image of a family cooperating and a church performing admirably could never be the same again once people noticed the change. Feeling secure in silence is okay. It may appear to be the quickest route out when problems are developing and the walls are beginning to close. Being silent inside Daystar was a survival strategy, not merely a decision. The Lamb family's close associates soon discovered that honesty came at a high price. Losing a job, respect, or relationships that once looked stable is difficult. This was a dangerous place. Silence was also the currency that held the kingdom together in a world where power and fame were highly valued. Jonathan and Susie Lamb broke the silence. Most parents wouldn't have expected Joni's reaction when they informed her that they had discovered Pete in her room. The objective shifted from swiftly safeguarding the child to swiftly safeguarding the ministry. Susie and Jonathan were viewed as threats rather than merely family members. They made a mistake as soon as they talked. After that, people were compelled to keep silent rather than merely told to do so. No, they replied. Saying no came at a great cost. Jobs left. Jonathan's poor performance was cited as the cause for his termination. He had actually declined to sign a contract that would have prevented him from discussing it. When he refused, he forfeited a job, a salary, and a future in the church his family had founded. Susie supported him despite knowing that doing so would entail foregoing her family support and financial stability. It was a psychological exile more than only a loss at work. Meanwhile, a few individuals within the circle chose a different path. Joni's son-in-law, Jonathan Weiss, witnessed inappropriate behavior and wrote about it in the well-known letter that helped him gain notoriety. He was initially prepared to stand beside Jonathan and Susie. He was going to support them in court and wrote down everything he observed and said about the kisses and hugs that looked way too near. Then there was silence. The police never received the letter. JW remained silent. Rebecca, his wife, did the same. They didn't continue because they were scared of losing their family, their church career, or the difficulty of considering what it would mean to turn against Joni. Silence kept them safe, but it cost them the truth. This is how power functions in close-knit communities. It is not necessary to make loud threats. It's not necessary to constantly give them orders. You will lose everything if you speak up. Rather, it permeates the atmosphere and influences decisions through implicit expectations. You'll be safe if you don't speak. Although it was never stated aloud, it was accepted. And when it comes to things like your employment, your reputation, your connections, and your position in the religious community, the pressure to remain silent is nearly intolerable. However, the cost of silence is high. It has a cost of its own. When Jonathan and Susie broke their silence, they were labeled traitors, liars, and even church enemies, and they lost their jobs. Those who remained silent paid a different, but no less significant, price. They had to face the reality that they knew a child wasn't safe because they were silent. Because they let the ministry to tell half-truths and conceal complete lies. People may eventually feel the burden of knowing what to do but choosing not to do it. Silence was ideal for Daystar as an organization. Because the Lamb family had so many close relationships with pastors, legislators, and affluent benefactors, they were able to put up a good show for the world. Official remarks simply mentioned the severe dispute between Pete, Susie, and Jonathan. Since no other family members raised their voices, the story remained cohesive. At home, supporters believed the Lambs were a team. Not much could be heard by insiders. Power benefits from silence because it conceals the truth. As long as the complex truth remained hidden, the ministry could continue to operate, raise funds, and reach millions of people. But silence like this doesn't stay. Always, cracks begin to appear. Letters are sent out. Court documents appear. Family disputes become too great to conceal. Each time the truth was revealed, Daystar found it more difficult to conceal the story. The cost of revealing the truth is always high. In the future, it cost Jonathan and Susie their positions at the church. She paid with her name when others who had previously trusted Joni's portrayal of power and unity started to have their doubts. No matter how many comments clear Pete's name, there will always be skepticism. Trust is the service's price. Regaining someone's trust when they discover that you withheld information from them is difficult. The fact that this story is about actual people makes it tragic. Contrary to what the news reported, it was about more than a ministry. It had to do with a family. The decision of whether to speak up or remain silent tears families, parents, and kids apart. To protect what they had, some chose to remain silent. Because they chose the truth, some folks lost nearly everything. This tale has continued long after the initial charge because of two competing possibilities. In situations such as these, silence, truth, and power are always in conflict. Silence safeguards power. The truth dismantles it. Additionally, those who are stuck must decide between honesty and safety. For Jonathan and Susie, the cost of silence was too great. They chose the truth despite the fact that it produced issues in their lives. Some people felt safer in silence at the moment, but that feeling might never completely go away. In the end, Daystar's narrative is about more than just a scandal. It's about how much suffering occurs when power and truth collide. Silence always has a price, even if it lasts for a long time. Furthermore, the harm inflicted by the quiet cannot be undone by wealth, influence, or well-considered remarks once the truth is out.